Another issue in front of us at the moment is the violent behaviour of teenagers and the escalating number of attacks by gang members, particularly around South Auckland. Manukau Mayor Barry Curtis said that police have imposed an always arrest policy for anyone caught carrying weapons or committing acts of violence. Earlier today I spoke with two of the community youth workers who have been running bridge building programs amongst the communities of South Auckland for many years. Allan is one of the community youth workers who brought gang members together for a meeting last weekend, and Willie Maea is currently District Pacific Co-ordinator for the county's Manukau Police. Welcome to you both. Allan, could I start with you? I mean, the media has the tendency to, paint something up, make it bigger than it actually is. Sure, a murder is bad, but is the gang problem out of control in South Auckland?
I think we do have a problem with gangs in South Auckland, but like you've already said, the media has sensationalised it, and as youth workers working in the community, it makes our job really hard. And especially when certain groups are highlighted, other groups want to say, well, if their name gets in the paper, why don't we do something that's going to get our name in the paper? So we're fighting against those kind of things. Yeah,
so it's a bit like tagging, isn't it? If you leave it up, it actually encourages more.
That's right.
Okay, so you've been having some meetings. Meetings can be talk fests where there's a bit of food, a bit of talk, and you go away and nothing's achieved. Is that what is happening at the moment?
Well, the meetings that we've had with the community and also with the gang leaders, they've been quite productive. I mean, I'm not one for going to meetings, but because of this issue, because of what's stemmed out of this, the meetings have been quite productive. We had a meeting with the Otara community on Monday, I think and the response from the community was amazing. And people like Sam Chapman and their organisation, John and Hilda Himapo, lots of people that have been working in the community for a long time all turned up, so it was amazing.
Okay, Willie, it hasn't really highlighted a new problem. We always knew there were gangs. What's brought it to this point?
I guess, if giving an example, back 20 years ago, we had these youth workers on the ground, those detached youth workers, as Allan would put it, and they were always out there doing good work, getting in amongst the so-called gang members or those that are hanging around in groups. These days there is none of that, and that's what we're wanting to bring back, is those volunteers which are crucial in helping our young people through.
Why aren't those youth workers there?
Economics.
So it's just a funding thing?
Funding thing. They've grown up and needing to support their own families, so they've gone a different way, but they're definitely still there, the heart's still there. And they all started with just the passion, the heart, being touched by the Lord and then wanting to do that, give that work back. So we need to get those groups back.
Okay, Allan, tell us about a typical gang member, because often when you think of a gang member, you think of a early 20s perhaps who's got the means, driving around in the car. But my understanding is that some of these kids involved in gangs are as young as 8 years old.
Well, the age does vary, and one of the big influences is the videos in terms of the African American subculture, the hip hop culture impacting on the way that they dress and they style their clothes. So all those things impact on a young person. But 10, 15 years ago, you could the pattern of a young person came from a broken home, or parents would belong to gang gang affiliates. Those kind of things you could tell, and so you could understand. You could start working a package there towards working with their family because you knew of the history. But the kids today, we're finding that some of the most ruthless young people that are out there on the streets actually go to church. They attend church, they attend youth group, and so being able to try and put them in a box, you can't. So we've got to right across the board. You can have someone that's coming from a good family background actually participating in gang activities.
Okay, so Willie, is there such a thing as a gang member? One type of gang member who is just looking for fights, and there's another gang member who just wants to belong to a group no different to anybody else wanting to go to Scouts or Girls Brigade.
I think there is. To find that group that just wants to be a group that just wants to hang out is difficult because they don't come to the attention of anyone. They're just sort of going along and just being friends. But the other group is the group that we're having problems with. And I recall a role that I had 4 years ago with the youth court, and that was because judges and lawyers saw that, using Pacifics as example, they were coming out of choir practice and then going down and doing aggravated robberies. Their families weren't supporting them in youth court, and there weren't any effective Pacific providers in their community so that they don't come back into the attention of the courts and the police. So yeah, I suppose the answer to your question, there is those two groups. We need to strengthen those groups that don't come to the attention of, so they can influence the other groups.
Yeah. Allan, is it a socio-economic problem? Is it only poor kids that get into gangs?
I think that's a good question, Bob. I think socioeconomic's impact on our families, and I think that, you know, families being the fabric of our society, and broken homes, and we have also the scenario of parents having to work 2 jobs, and kids staying at home by themselves, and you have a 13-year-old child looking after siblings as young as 7, 6, 5. So we do get those dynamics. Yeah. So there is a socio-economic impact on the communities and families.
I guess what I'm getting at is that only the poor areas of Christchurch, of Porirua, of South Auckland that are likely to get gangs, or are there also gangs in Tauranga and Remuera?
That's a really good question. I mean, I know of those areas, you know, and they come to the highlight, but I think there's something right across the board. You know, Central Auckland, West Auckland, they're in those neighbourhoods as well. Yeah. I mean, there could be gangs. I'm sure I think there's talk about gangs in Howick, you know, and that's a pretty good, stable, you know, community, so to speak.
Okay. Willie, I don't want you to shoot your own organisation in the foot, but you were involved with the court system, and I guess the overriding question is people may think it's too soft. Like I was looking at community service, where somebody is sentenced to community service, less than 25% show up for their punishment, even do it. We've got family group conferences, which some people call talkfest conferences. Is the justice system doing its job? Because surely a certain element of fear, of consequence is a deterrent. What do you think about that?
My personal view is that the act or the punishment has not suited the rise in the level of serious crime. So whilst family group conferences are good because it's always about getting the child back to the family and hopefully that the family's strong enough to support them and that's the last time we see them. But sadly that's not the point, and again I can give an example going back to economics in that, like Allan said, because both parents have to work, the child is then educated by movies and music and I suppose the influences out on the street.
You see, this is the interesting perspective, Allan, is that you're here, you want to help the families, but at the same time, would you actually like to see there to be a bit more tough love, a bit more consequence? Is that what you're saying?
I think that's part and parcel of what, you know, of addressing that issue, and I think there needs to be that cause and effect. You know, every action has a consequence, and we need to implement that in terms of what we're presenting and working with the kids, and they need to know that too, because a lot of the kids don't know that there are consequences or refuse to acknowledge that there are consequences. You
are both working with the Polynesian community. Is this just a Polynesian thing? I mean, is it other immigrant groups, Asian gangs?
Definitely. There's not just Polynesian. There's it's made known that there are Indian gangs out there. You know, whether they've started up as a form of protection or, you know, rallying together so that they're not picked on. Not too sure, but definitely not. I think Pacific or Polynesian groups are higher numbers because we represent a high number in this area.
But the interesting thing is, even in the Polynesian community, you've got Samoan versus Tonga. You know, why is that? Is it just gang versus gang? I mean, is there such a thing as Samoan gang versus Samoan gang?
There's a change in terms of the shape of gangs and how they look. It's become more territorial instead of becoming racial. Right. So it could be Otara, Mangere.
So that's why we see kids going to a certain school to deal with the kids at that school. So it's not racial, it's
those things are connected, it's around.
Is that a common trend with the States?
Yeah, it is.
They are territorial over there as well. And of course the colours, the red and blue, also indicate just where they're from. But
okay, let's take a quick break. When I come back, I'd like to talk about how much the breakdown of the family is contributing to kids' desires to belong to gangs. Welcome back. My guests are both youth workers in South Auckland, Allan and Willie Maea. Willie, the breakdown of the family, a lot of people say that the social problems in New Zealand are caused by fatherlessness. It's fathers not being around. How true is that for the kids you're working with in gangs?
I think to a pretty big extent it's true in that you need that positive role model. You know, that's important, is that the positive role model when the father is around to lead the young person so that they got someone that they can follow and and take their cues from, to speak to them from that male perspective, and do the correcting when it needs to be done.
Yeah.
So I really support that view.
You know, one thing that we were just talking about earlier in the program is about parental discipline, and what seems to be happening in New Zealand is that parents are being told to back off, that they don't have the right to discipline their kids. And what I worry is that people who come from other cultures, like the Polynesian, like the Indian culture, the message to parents is, in New Zealand, the New Zealand way is, let the kids do what they want. How much truth is there to that? Allan, maybe you could answer that first.
Well, it definitely puts those cultures on the back foot in terms of what they've learned all their life, then coming into a new culture and saying, what you're doing is wrong. And in terms of those, the messages that are sent to those families and cultures, it can really alienate them. And so those are the dilemmas that we face in terms of cultures coming into a new culture like New Zealand, of course. And
because, I mean, for example, the Indian culture, the Pacific Island culture, are very strong discipline, aren't they? And then they come into a country that says, well, we're not going to touch you, and parents, you can't touch them, and, you know, they've got human rights and we'll send them off to Youth Law Project if there's a problem.
yeah.
And they, people I've spoken to, they respect that. Yeah, there is a law that you can't touch them. But what the problem is that, what is the options? You know, what is the alternative then? Because when you get our parents that come from one set of learning from the islands, and they only know one sort of discipline, then be told, no, you can't do that. So they shrug their shoulders. And of course, what they do then is that they don't touch them at all, they don't talk to the kids at all. So you have that problem that the kid thinks that they can do what they want.
Okay, so why does a young person get into a gang? What ultimately is driving that?
I suppose I can take it back to just my own experience, in that it was just interesting, as opposed to just staying at home doing homework. There is that broken family aspect where they're hardened or they come from families that have already been in gangs. But for the likes of a person that just finds it interesting, their school friends, and they talk about how they were down in the corner and they were having laughs and, you know, just mucking around.
So it's that belonging.
Yeah, that belonging.
So when does it cross the border to being illegal activity? How much illegal activity did you get into because of the belonging to the gang and the peer pressure?
There was a lot, because there's always that the element of wanting to prove yourself, and I think that's a big aspect of why gangs are around. That Otara has that stigma alongside Māngere, and so it's always they think that they have to prove themselves to other areas and to other people. So yeah.
So that's the staunchness, the appearance. Okay, so what would entice a young person to get out of a gang? I mean, what can be offered that's better than that belonging and that identity and that staunchness?
School is more interesting. The subjects are taught a lot more interesting, that relates to them.
Sense of success?
Sense of success. And like Allan always says, it's got to be a goal that they can see, as opposed to a goal that's put in front of them. Right. More activities out in the community, support of sports clubs.
Yeah.
And I guess I take it back to having those volunteers out there in our streets as well.
So it's the mentoring.
Mentoring,
okay,
for sure, big time.
So yeah, because if you've got fatherlessness, mentoring is a big role, isn't it?
Definitely. And a lot of the young men we've worked in the program, you'll find that a high percentage of them don't have fathers. And so the role models that have been men in their lives have been negative role models. So they grow up with this distorted view of being what it is to be a man, a young man. And so, you know, those deficiencies are there as they're growing up, and it manifests in itself by joining gangs.
Okay, so like you say, gangs have been around for a long time. You were in a gang a long time ago.
Oh,
but in terms of the violence, the level of violence has got way more. I mean, did you ever know about a murder in your gang life?
No. Not from that young group. You know, from the juvenile or the youth gangs. You hear about it in the more adult.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, the level of violence and the weaponry that they use these days.
Allan, just tell us about the influence of rap music, because the rap industry were quick to come out and say, look, it's got nothing to do with us. And there's violent videos on TV and PlayStation games. Is that influencing the kids' behaviours?
Of course it's influencing the kids' behaviour. It's a major influence. I mean, rap, when you know its history, hip-hop was an expression of the young African-American, Hispanic people trying to express themselves through music. But there's negative sides to it and positive sides to it. And what's really impacting on our young people is the negative sides, because it's almost like a license to be able to, okay, well, if I can express myself through this way, it's because I see it on television, it must be all right. So they go out and they take those lyrics to heart, and then we get these, these issues and troubles in our community.
Okay, let's just finish on two positives. Firstly, a word of encouragement for families, and maybe people watching who know their kids are involved in gangs. What would you say to the parents? What can they do to help?
Well, just get in contact with those likes of Allan, of Sally Paea, who's doing good work out at Crossbow Ministries. Anyone that they know that are working with youth. Even the police. I work for the police, and there's myself and Al Filipaina who are out there in the grassroots, that we can link people. There's people that work in the courts that can link those sort of families to youth workers, to those that are experts.
Yeah. So there is help, and good place to start would be what? Police?
Police.
Just say you think your kid's involved in gangs.
Yep.
And can you put me on to somebody?
Exactly.
Okay.
Yep.
You guys said that your motivation was your Christian faith. You came get out of that lifestyle, Allan?
Because I woke up one morning thinking, if I die, where am I going to go? What's my life going to... And it was all about identity.
Yeah.
A sense of wanting to belong, a sense of feeling worthwhile, a sense of being valued as a person. And I only found that really until I came to the Lord. So that's why... And if we can get changed, if we can be changed as young men, we have no doubt it can happen for other young men out there on the streets.
Never too far. Willie, what was it? What was the turning point? What was the watershed for you?
Well, I'll relate it to a story. When we were sort of two gangs in Otara, a gang that I belonged to and one that we were rivals. And we were putting each other into hospital. And then I got a knock on the door, as I suppose it was one of the gang leaders. And this young person on the street, working as a youth worker, invited me to come to a meeting to discuss and to stop the violence. I went along with him, and we shook hands with the rival gang, and there was no more violence between these two groups. That young person was Eddie Varcola, yes. And he had just become a born-again Christian, and he thought that his calling was to go out there and stop the violence. About 2 years ago, this is 20 years ago, I'm now working alongside guys that I was wanting to fight against and vice versa. And the team leader that I shook hands with ran into a family house that was on fire and saved an auntie, but couldn't try to save two of my nieces and nephews. So that was one of the turning points. That's an example that things can come out of bad, that there is hope, and those kids are no different to us. It's just having us on the ground working alongside them.
We're called to be peacemakers.
Exactly.
Yeah. Willie and Allan, keep up the great work. Thanks for your time.
Thanks, Bob.
My guests were Allan and Willie Maea, both Samoan, both living in Otara with their families, and both dedicated to their work of encouraging and mentoring the youth of South Auckland.